So I'm going to open it up to the floor for any questions. Who's going to be first off the mark with a question? I think we may have had some on the on our Twitter hashtag as well. Do you want to go, Matt, first?
Yeah, if the mic's working. We've got the hashtag is Time2Work. On Twitter, we've got a question from somebody called Tracy, and that is: there is talk of a retirement age in the future of 75. How do you think, with an ageing population, that employers will manage to support workers in the future, given that 1 in 4 people in England live with a long-term condition?
Okay. I think, Nick, perhaps you might be best placed to take that one.
So, I'm at 57. I'm looking at that statement with trepidation, but I think we're already there, to be honest. When we talk about some of our partners, our business is quite polarised. So about 40% of our business is age 50 and been with the partnership probably more than 15 years. And the other 40% is sort of under 27, 28. So if you've been working in our distribution, delivering sofas around London for 25 years, carrying them up flights of stairs, your knees, hips, back are all quite well used by now. And that's before you layer on anything else to do with age. And it creates new other challenges around things like dementia, to name but one. So yes, I think it will become more challenging for more people and more employers. I think that's just a fact of life. People are living longer, but not necessarily healthier lives. And I think with no enforced retirement and with pensions not necessarily in a great place for people on an individual basis, I think it will be increasingly difficult. I'm not sure what the question was. What was the answer? I don't know, other than try harder, be more imaginative, care more.
I think my real concern is that we're not thinking about this logically. We're assuming everybody will be able to do every type of work indefinitely. And that clearly doesn't make any sense. We're all astonished that Roger Federer can still win tennis tournaments at the age of 38. We're not expecting him to be doing it at 48 or 58, but we're expecting our brickies to be able to climb ladders and lay bricks at the top of a steep building until they're 65, 75, goodness knows whatever age we'll end up with. And really this ties into the biz strategy of business innovation and skills and thinking about the 100-year life. We need opportunities for retraining. We need opportunities for individuals to access different kinds of planning, financial planning alongside educational planning, so people can move in and out of different career types. And really, in particular, we need to be looking at the people in the most socioeconomically deprived part of our country, least likely to have their own pension, least likely to own their own home, and most likely to be doing the most tough physical work. We have a major problem coming if we don't start being much more creative.
Thank you. We've got another question back. Yes, this lady.
Hi, I'd like to ask Kyle and Kate, what gave you the confidence to be able to talk about your condition? Because people that I represent, that's one of their big issues. They just don't have the confidence to talk about their condition.
I think mine is being quite young myself. I want people to understand me and take me for me. My condition's a part of me. I can't change that anymore. So I want employers to understand it. I want people trying to find work to actually have faith that there is good employers out there that will help you and understand you. And as long as you've got that right support, you can do the right thing.
Yeah, and I think there is such a stigma surrounding young people with arthritis and invisible illnesses that arthritis is typically associated with older people and things like that. And for us, I think it's trying to go out there and spread the message that, young people get arthritis too, and that doesn't define who we are, but we might have limited capabilities, but our brain still works. There's nothing wrong with our brains. So, having that support from an employer and just going, even outside employment, going out and spreading the message that, and just trying to get people to understand what arthritis is, really, as well.
Did your employers help you explain to your colleagues as well as? things in place for you to be a good employee. What about for the rest of the workforce?
I think for employers, it's one of those, with arthritis, I don't know if you feel the same way, unless you're going through it yourself, it's hard for someone to explain to your colleagues what you've got. So it's actually better to give the first-hand account. And they can, your colleagues who you work with on a daily basis will see the change in your condition. So they'll see you on a good day, and then the next day they might see you having a flare-up. And I think that's probably, they understand more that way than if someone who hasn't got the condition just reading from a piece of paper and trying to explain to them. So I think communication from yourself to your colleagues is probably better to get that understanding across.
I had assistance from Access to Work, so I actually had a counsellor through them who offered to come in and speak to my employer and my other employees in relation to my conditions. And I found that helped to some degree, but like Kate said, actually people coming up and asking was a lot easier because I live it. I'm the one that knows how I feel and what I can and can't do. So I found that a lot of people did come up and ask, why have you got that special keyboard? What's going on? But my employer would, if I said, got a bit of an issue here, and I did when I first started, I had an issue. I was getting special treatment, which wasn't the case. It was treatment I needed and that was available for others. And it was addressed in a very large meeting on if people need help, ask for it. And there are people in the company with a lot of disabilities that needed that help. Just mine was a bit more obvious, and I'm open about it.
Yeah. And I think also having that openness and having people ask you the questions. I would rather someone ask me about my condition than speculate what my condition is as well.
We've had a number of requests from all sorts of different employers where not the individual within their workplace didn't feel that they wanted to talk about themselves to their colleagues, but we've had volunteers who have RA that go in and talk about. So it's still from the patient's perspective, from the lived experience, but not that individual that's actually there working alongside those people, and that seems to really help a lot. We see that seems to be on the increase as well. We've had a number of requests fairly recently to go in and help explain what rheumatoid arthritis is to a bigger workplace area. Elsa.
Louise, a question for you. I always remember hearing Carol Black talk, and when she was Director for Health and Work for the government, and whose background was in rheumatology, and it's her saying, to my shame, as a rheumatologist, I never once asked any of my patients about work and about any problems that they might be having in work. We know that we've done quite a lot, and BSR have done some training programs, and various people have done a lot of work on this subject. But how realistic do you think it is for rheumatology teams with such a reduced amount of resource today and so little time on routine clinical outpatient appointments to ensure that you always raise the issue of work with working age participants, patients?
I think it is a challenge, and I think that the resources within the NHS are becoming more and more stretched, and time is limited in consultations. There's no doubt about that. I think there is an understanding, though, within the clinician community that it is important. I think that patients are actually now raising it more in their consultations too, though I think they're feeling much more empowered, and they raise it themselves just for advice and guidance. And I think that's also where we step in quite a bit as well as allied healthcare professionals and physios and occupational therapists, that patients often discuss perhaps more about things, how they navigate that with work and how they can help them through that process. But I think it will remain a challenge I don't think it's not recognised. I just think it's going to be a challenge in a busy clinic.
I mean, as a patient going to a clinical experience, there's barely enough time to talk about your condition, let alone raise any discussion of work. Or, I mean, you just don't have enough time to talk about your condition, really. You know, central London hospitals are really stretched, so it's just not even feasible.
I think that's where we step in a little bit more as specialist nurses and our specialist colleagues can help, and of course amazing organisations like NRAS help oil the wheels with that as well. But yes, it is a challenge. I say it's not recognised as important at all, but the crux of the consultation, yes, you're right, is probably more about the headlines than some of the wider issues in patients' lives.
There was a hand at the back there somewhere.
So speaking as a rheumatologist, I agree there's always a challenge of time, but it doesn't really take long to ask a question. And I think the main thing is people are nervous of opening up a can of worms they don't know how to deal with. But I think as long as there are clear referral pathways, then there's no excuse not to ask the question. And I think what we also have to do is upskill the work support teams, such as work coaches and disability employment advisors, to understand the challenges of arthritis and how to advise people appropriately, because they don't know how to have those conversations either.
Yeah, I completely agree with you, Tony. To be really clear, I think our allied health professional colleagues are better at this than doctors have been historically, because they really don't feel very secure in their knowledge about working issues, so they don't really want to ask and find they're then confounded with not knowing what to answer. I would, I feel very sad hearing the previous speaker and feeling that you're so constrained. I would empower you to take a list in with you and say, "Hey, young man, I'm not finished yet. I want to tell you about my work issues." Get them being there. That's what you're there for. Is what matters to you, not what matters to them.
I'd just like to say I used to work for John Lewis, who used to stack shelves up in Glasgow, so I appreciate how good John Lewis treat their employees. So it's really good to see you here. It's fantastic and refreshing. But my question is, what should we, the arthritis kind of community, patients and clinicians and organisations, be doing to kind of encourage, I guess, ways of working like John Lewis, and to encourage kind of similar ways of working? I think
you've seen some of it today, and I think it's being empowered to speak up. So I think some of the other. So I think if you look at mental health particularly, I think the campaigns led by the Princes and various other people around destigmatisation of what have been taboo subjects in society and at work have increasingly had an impact. And so there's this whole thing around, is mental health growing because actually it was already there, but actually it was just hidden, discussed, or is it being driven by lots more young people on? All of those things have some part in it. I think, and we were talking at the coffee break around how do we see this playing through in an 80,000 employee business. We have huge communities. We use Google+, so as a social media sort of type thing within the business that is partner-led, so employee-led, around subjects that are important to them. We've got 7 specific networks around the ability group for people with different forms of disability that get together to talk about things that are important to them. We use Google+, and I think it's something like 6 million different emails and things going on. So for next month, there's a launch of a whole campaign about information around the menopause, and partners that have joined the Google+ community. They share ideas with each other. They network. They meet. They talk. As they wish to. But you're empowering people to own it and share what they want to share. They feel comfortable. As we've seen today, that's hugely powerful. But people need to feel supported in the right environment, and they're not going to be criticised, chastised, or treated badly. So it comes with some degree of humanity, kindness, empathy, which are all cultural things. And I think there's a kind of thing about creating a movement. If you can create the right movement and get enough people engaged, I didn't talk about this today, but we've launched sort of wellbeing champions last year. Not a new thing, it's not a new idea. In the year, we've got over 600 people who voluntarily spend time outside of their day job to kind of organise events and things for their local shop or distribution centre, and it's grown. Because actually that's not a top-down executive director kind of initiative. It's actually doing things locally that's important to them around things that they think matter. And that's what you want to do. You want to give people the opportunity to make a difference to their own lives and those around you. So,
I think Tony had another question at the back, and then we'll come to you.
So it's really for the people who gave the case studies. And going back to my previous point, did you get much support from your rheumatology department in those conversations you're having with your employer about how they could help you or sort of put your case over? And would it have been more helpful if you did get more support in that direction?
So my experience, I've been under 2 NHS trusts, one whilst I was at university and one whilst I've been back home, I suppose. Rheumatologists at one NHS trust were absolutely fantastic. I cannot fault them. The other NHS trust that I'm under at the moment, my experience has been that the consultants didn't really have the time to speak to me, but the biologics nurses have been incredibly supportive, followed by the occupational therapists. And the occupational therapists gave me information to take away to give to my employers. There hasn't been any communication with my employers, but my occupational therapist said, we're happy to speak to your employer, but obviously from an employer's point of view, that's why they send you to occupational health to see what support measures can be put in place for you. So that's the sort of experience I've had.
Mine, when I first got diagnosed, they were really supportive. They did laugh when I said that I was going to be back at work within a couple of weeks, which was never ever going to happen, but I was determined that that was the case. He then realised that I am a very stubborn little soul, and I was going to go back to work whether he told me it was never going to happen or not. And at that point I went in with my list of questions that I do quite regularly with my rheumatologist, and work was quite a big topic for me, and I got him to actually write a letter to support my application at my current job. So I've had quite a good relationship with mine, luckily.
There's a question down here at the front. We're giving Matt plenty of exercise. This is all good.
Good for his well-being.
Good for your well-being.
Yeah. Hi, I was just wondering if anyone had any particular advice around how to address the question in interviews when you've been out of work for a while because of your health condition, particularly since there's concern that the employer would perhaps worry that it would reoccur and then affect time spent at work. Thank you.
I started off, when I started applying for jobs, trying to avoid the question. I started applying for jobs I knew that I couldn't do, but I still went to the interviews to try and see if I could convince myself that I could still do it. But the reality, it wasn't. With my new employer, I think my only advice is just be completely straight up. Be honest with them, because if you're honest with them, you can work with them better, and the big saying, you live it. You tell them what you need, what you want, and if you are open and honest with them, then they're more willing to give and accept that. Whereas if you hide behind it, if something happens, then you'll kind of put yourself in that position.
So for me, I have every single application that I have made, I've been totally upfront during the application process. So majority of applications come with an equal opportunities form, which I will always fill in. And sometimes I perhaps go into too much depth about what my condition is, but I feel that if you're upfront about that condition, then they're more likely to take that into consideration when they're deciding on who they're going to interview. And if they're still, this is actually something I was going to talk about earlier, but I didn't have enough time. But I've found that if an employer is going to be one of those employers who will judge you on your condition, you don't want to work for them anyway. So be upfront from the beginning. And if they offer you an interview, they've obviously gone through your application and noted that you've got a medical condition, and therefore they're taking on that responsibility by giving you the interview and then potentially the job. So of course your skills and everything like that should speak volumes, but with regards to being upfront, I wouldn't hesitate. And if they want to know more about your condition, the interview is a perfect opportunity for you to ask them questions as well. And like I said a little bit earlier, if you've got any queries as well, there is no harm in contacting their HR department and seeing what support is already in place. And if there's any other people that might have long-term conditions in employment there as well. So always ask. There's never any harm in doing that.
Another question in the middle of the room there. These are great questions, really good.
Hi, I just we've talked a lot about HR departments, and these are all the big employers. But has anybody got any experience of working for a small employer who can't put all that in place?
Yes. So with the two bad experiences that I gave you earlier. So the first one was actually for a national. Well, it was a local branch of a national organisation. But there wasn't actually an HR representative or a department locally that I could refer to. With the hotel and hospitality work that I did, that was an independent business, and there was absolutely no HR representative, no HR department, and that's why there was no one I could speak to about my conditions, despite already being upfront with them. And when times got tough, that there was no one to express these concerns with. So I kind of just soldiered on. But the positive experiences I've had have been from larger organisations.
Karen,
I think it's a very important point you're raising, which of course is that only about half of the businesses in this country are large businesses. About half the workforce are employed in a small or medium-sized enterprise without, sadly, things like HR or occupational health support. We know that probably over half of this country doesn't have an occupational health person to access, which means their GP and their rheumatology team are their occupational health. So we do have a lot more work to do to make it possible for people in those settings to provide the same sort of support we're hearing described. There's some incredibly empathic and very good business people running those sorts of businesses, so it's entirely possible with the right communication strategy to get good support. And I have many instances from patients who are in small businesses where it's actually worked really well, that they've been honest and the person's been able to support them, even though they're a small business. But it is more challenging, and I completely agree with Nick's point about if we could incentivize employers to make it even more worth their while to be good at this, we would all benefit from that.
Elsa.
I just wanted to see Matt run down.
Yeah, it's fun, isn't it? Very entertaining.
I think that is a great and important question, and that's really why we made these videos with CBI and the REC. Because we're going to be pushing these out not only through our own social media channels, but also through the CBI networks right across businesses across the UK and the REC networks, so that we can start to get these messages out to the smaller employers, because often it's not, as Karen says, they might be very empathic and good individuals running these smaller businesses, but they don't know what support is out there, they don't know where to go to get that support, and they don't know who to contact. So it's those particular messages that we're really focusing on in terms of these videos that we're launching today, and also that we will be launching again, relaunching on World Arthritis Day on the 12th of October this year, to support the EULAR Don't Delay, Connect Today and
Time to Work
theme this year.
Just following up on that, I mean, we had a conversation earlier today about access to work, and we've heard it mentioned quite a few times, but gosh, it's the best kept secret ever. You know, not an awful lot, especially the smaller employers, know about access to work. So we need to be far more promoting of that and signposting to access to work, because we've heard what a big difference it can make to not just the employee, but to the employer. Most employers want to do the right thing. They value their staff, they value the time and resource and expenditure they've put into training those people. So it makes economic sense to keep them in work, because otherwise they're losing that expertise and have to start from scratch. And recruitment costs are ridiculously expensive. So, you know, you need to, value your staff, and most employers want to do the right thing. But our favourite saying in NRAS, you don't know what you don't know. And hopefully through these resources, through our booklets, through signposting, through people like yourselves just talking to other colleagues, spreading the news, that we can get that movement that we heard earlier from Nick, if we're all driving in the same direction. Have we any other questions? If not, I will bring this to an end. We have some information at the back. Do please go and have a look at what AbilityNet can offer as well in the workplace. It's really fantastic resources. And this gives you an opportunity just to chat to each other, chat to ourselves, come and have a chat with the panellists. But before I close, I'd like to say a huge thank you to Professor Karen Walker-Bone, Louise Parker, Kyla Sanders, Kate Ellis and Nick Davison for taking the time out of their very busy days to come and share it with us. And thank you all for attending. Thank you very much.